Let's go on to the next topic here. Communism and Marxism. Now, this quote is by Professor Ruth Weiss. She's the Martin Koretz Professor of Yiddish Literature and Professor of Comparative Literature at Harvard University. And this quote comes from the Washington Times, February 11th, 1997, page A17. Quote goes as follows, open quote. Women's liberation, if not the most extreme, then certainly the most influential new Marxist movement in America, had done to the American home what communism did to the Russian economy. And most of the ruin is irreversible. By defining relations between men and women in terms of power and competition instead of reciprocity and cooperation, the movement tore apart the most basic and fragile contract in human society, the unit from which all other social institutions draw their strength. Close quote. This essentially is, in a nutshell, what you talked about at the top of the show. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that is a fair statement.
Okay. I think that one doesn't require any further analogy. I think it was pretty self-explanatory. Right? Here's one that's bizarre. I wanted to go over one that was bizarre. So if anybody can make sense of this one, let me know. Put a comment in the low bar. This is by Luce Irigaray. I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name because it doesn't appear French. Maybe it is. This is a French feminist, philosopher, linguist, psycholinguist, psychoanalyst, sociologist, cultural theorist, and this comes from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Open quotes. E equals MC squared characterized as a sexual sex equation, because it privileges the speed of light over other speeds that are vitally necessary to us. Close quote. This person is thinking way too hard. It's math. Energy equals mass times light squared. I mean, it's taking mass and converting to energy. I mean, anybody who's watched the Star Trek series, when you see someone step onto the transporter pad, and they turn into this a mist of light, and then they rematerialize somewhere else. That theory of E equals MC squared is what's happening. Taking mass, converting to energy, and then they are taking the energy and reconverting it back to mass. I mean, keep me honest if that's wrong. I could be way off base here, but how does that become a sexed equation?
Well, I've worked as an IT analyst in universities, and the only theory that I can come up with is that at the time of writing those words or speaking those words in their original form, I'm pretty sure her office was right next to the chemistry lab, and somebody left open a very powerful, jar, and maybe she whiffed in some of the fumes and wasn't thinking rationally, because I cannot fathom how anyone could say that.
Okay, that one doesn't require any further discussion. It stands on its own. It's just bizarre. Okay, I took one here, although I probably could have taken a dozen, but I need to keep this show in a reasonable amount of time. This topic here is justification of false rape allegations against men. So, Time Magazine's euphemism of actual comments made by Catherine Commons, I think Nancy Gibbs's edition of June 2001 edition of Cover Stories, When Is It Rape? The quote from Catherine Commons goes as follows, open quote. Men who are unjustly accused of rape can sometimes gain from the experience, close quote.
Wow.
Okay, explain to me, in terms that everybody listening could understand, what the man gains relative to what he loses and how that benefits a guy. Hey, I was falsely accused of rape, but it was a good thing. How many guys, really?
Okay, I'll give you the benefit. Here's the benefit. Absolutely zero. There's no conceivable way. And this requires basic understanding of the male psyche, contrary to feminist theory, mainstream feminist theory, notwithstanding what the dictionary definition tells you. Men have a very deep, instinctual part of their psyche to protect women. And to be accused of doing the exact opposite, not only is that a death sentence if you get sent to jail, you'll probably be murdered in prison. And this is easy to establish with multiple cases of where men have been murdered in prison because they've hurt a woman. It goes against the absolute core of a man's programming, biologically. It goes right against millions and millions of years of established human nature. And to tell any man that he's going to benefit from being falsely accused of rape and that he's going to benefit from this is absolutely preposterous. It is propaganda at its lowest or finest, depending on how you want to see it. And it is an absolute aberration of the basic nature of men. But there's a reason behind the insanity, is that particular quote is engineered to get women to doubt the very nature of men. Because if women doubt the very protective nature of men, it's going to be easier for women to start hating men and see them as the enemy. And that is the whole purpose of that quote.
And if you watch any of our media, our being Western media, Canada, the US, other Western countries, the constant barrage of fear. Every news story has dead, blood, scared. You know, all the trigger words are in there if you listen very carefully. Watch it, any channel, any news channel, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, whatever. Watch them for a little while. Listen to the news stories that come up and notice how many of those news stories have a word or a phrase in it that somehow leads to a state of fear. And then notice the commercial ad that runs shortly after that oftentimes is an insurance company. Because insurance, of course, provides you with a mechanism to deal with if something goes wrong, I have insurance to cover me. So, I mean, the insurance basically is it's a product that you buy just in case. It's a just in case product. Well, you can't manufacture accidents. Well, maybe you could. What you can manufacture is fear. If I have you in a constant state of fear, and I say, insurance policy, this will, save your children, save this, save that. Hey, you know what? I don't have that insurance policy. I probably need to go top this up or just consider. And the thing is, it's done so subtly, you don't necessarily connect the dots. But this constant creation of anxiety, and then suddenly we're here to save the day. That's, that's one of the biggest industries that there are is insurance. I mean, it's just money for essentially nothing unless something goes wrong.
One of the methodologies which I follow, and it goes along the lines of not just teaching your children a whole bunch of facts, but actually teaching future generations how to think for themselves, is that if you want to get to the real story, follow the money trail. And I'll be very brief on this point, but money underpins it everything. Governments want power, and money is the tool that they use to gain power over people. So insurance is one imaginary system stacked upon another imaginary system, which is the bank system. And they're using these two imaginary devices to gain enormous amounts of power over people. So always ask yourself, what does this party gain by creating a device of, what do they gain? Ultimately, it's power and money. That's what it boils down to. And so the hatred is it's all a part of the plan. They want people fighting each other, because that destabilized society is how governments grow in power. And that is why, if you study historical events like the Wounded Knee Massacre, which is a very important piece of American history, when a whole entire camp of Indians was wiped out by government agents shortly after confiscating their weapons. When governments go around and start confiscating weapons and they start mass producing fear as an industrialized product, it's never going to end in a good way.
Right. I mean, the common phrase that a lot of news magazines and newspapers use is, if it bleeds, it leads.
Exactly.
If you enjoyed the show and want to see more, join our Facebook page called Man Cave by Gentlemen United. All of our shows, tons of additional content, and invitations to future shows are posted there. You can add to the conversation and suggest future discussion topics. Please like, comment, share, and most of all, subscribe by clicking the Gentlemen United icon. I promise it's free. Thanks again for joining us in the Man Cave.
Enjoyed the show? Like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for joining us in the Man Cave.